Uyo uko kuno apo pano mamuona kere nai.
Right, 11 November 2021, and today I'm joined by my guest from a few weeks ago, Mr. Rutendo Benson Matinyarare. How are you, sir?
I'm great, my friend. How are you?
Fantastic, and I really appreciate your coming here to give us an update on the issue of sanctions. Did you see the statement by the Chinese on the Zimbabwe sanctions?
Yes, I did see this. I did see the statement by the Chinese on the Zimbabwe sanctions. I thought it was interesting that they reiterated the illegality of the sanctions and the fact that the sanctions senders are actually violating human rights, if not perpetuating crimes against humanity.
Okay, so I've put the statement by the Chinese on the gambako.com website. Basically, what the Chinese are saying is that they stated their position that Africa's call for justice has their support. The observation by the United Nations Special Rapporteur shows once again that unilateral sanctions have had a debilitating impact on Zimbabwe's capability to grow the economy and improve public welfare, and on the Zimbabwe people's daily life and enjoyment of various rights. The international community is increasingly repulsed by these sanctions. Human rights is a favorite subject of Western countries, including the US, but what they practice runs counter to what they preach. This is a very, very hard-hitting statement by the Chinese. Is it going to have any impact on the United States?
Oh, yes, it's going to have a very huge impact on the United States, because it means that the Chinese are going to use their growing influence in the international arena to start pressuring the United States and the Europeans to observe human rights and to stop violating human rights in third world countries. And like it is that China is saying, for a very long time, human rights have been the preserve of what it is that these Western nations say are human rights. Where they go and violate the human rights of people in countries like Zimbabwe by imposing these sanctions, countries like Iraq and Venezuela, where millions of people have died because of sanctions, they've always been able to make it seem like those people that they're imposing sanctions on or bringing war against are not human. But the Chinese now, as a superpower, are now beginning to say to them that you have to understand that human rights are indivisible, and the human rights of the people in Zimbabwe, even though they are black, are human rights. You've got to observe them. Otherwise, we're going to take off this mask that you're policemen of human rights, yet you are actually the biggest violators of human rights. It's very interesting, and they're going to use this pressure in the UN, in the WTO, and other institutions. And this is why our strategy in fighting sanctions had always said that we need to include the international community, countries like China, to start putting pressure on these Western nations. And I think it's going to work.
Okay, so let's look at the report which is being referred to here by the Chinese, the UN Special Rapporteur. What is your view? Is the United States correct to reject this report? You saw what happened a few weeks ago after the report was publicized. Did you see the response by the United States of America?
Yes, I did see the response of the United States, and unfortunately, they do not have a say in whether the report is correct or not. And if they indeed feel that the report is not correct, then they need to challenge it through the International Court of Justice. Because quite frankly, the Special Rapporteur's office is like any other lawyer, it's like any other judge in the world. Their rulings are considered as binding, and the opinion of the nation that is being caught out doesn't really matter unless they've got a legal argument that they can put in front of a legal institution to rebut what it is that the Human Rights Council is saying. And remember, the United States itself sits on the Human Rights Council. They've just been elected to that council. So unless they want to undermine the authority of these very same institutions that the United States created, they just have to accept what it is that's being said. Otherwise, they're going to look like they're undermining that institution. Another thing is you need to understand that the UN is not open for attack. Even in warfare or in wartime, you cannot attack reporters, you cannot attack the Red Cross, and you cannot attack UN personnel. And what it is that the United States tried to do last time was to attack the institution of the UN by attacking the report of the Special Rapporteur. And that Special Rapporteur is an expert at international law. She has lectured international law. She has contributed to the body of international law and customs that has been created. You cannot try to cast aspersions upon a person with such a solid resume as this Special Rapporteur, and the Americans know it. So it's just rhetoric to save face. But I think with the attack that the Americans did on the ICC, when the ICC started saying that it was going to investigate their war crimes in Afghanistan, and then an attack on a Special Rapporteur, they're actually diminishing their image, they're actually diminishing their stance that they believe in rule of law, because they're illustrating that they don't believe in rule of law.
Okay, now let's go to the people that are affected by sanctions. The Special Rapporteur recommended that the sanctions must be lifted on individuals, on corporates, and on the government of Zimbabwe. What options are available to people that are actually under sanctions or on the sanction list right now as you speak?
Well, with this report that the Special Rapporteur has given, the Special Rapporteur's report actually is tantamount to saying that the Americans, the Europeans, the Canadians, Australians, and the UK who impose these sanctions are actually perpetuating crimes against humanity. Because she talks about the fact that people are being deprived of healthcare, they're being deprived of water, of food, of social development and economic development. The moment you deprive civilians of those basic services and inalienable rights, these are rights you can never take away from human beings for whatever reason, that can be construed as persecution. Persecution in its own respect, where you affect people's lives, either physically, mentally, or otherwise, is actually a crime against humanity. So with that kind of a damning report of these sanctions, and the fact that they're illegal at international law, they were not executed by a multilateral institution like the UN. And the Special Rapporteur went on to point out that the UN itself has stopped using economic sanctions because of the devastation they cause. That in itself is a very big indictment. That indictment can then be used by companies in Zimbabwe, by civilians and citizens of Zimbabwe, to take the United States to international courts or to the International Court of Justice, which is the court of the UN. It can also go further to allow the government of Zimbabwe to go and hold hands with SADC and other African countries that have suffered because of these sanctions. Countries like South Africa, Botswana, where there have been refugees spilling into their countries because of this crime against humanity. They can hold hands and take the United States to courts. But more critically, there are many Americans, many British investors, many American companies, European companies that have been barred from doing business in Zimbabwe that now have an opportunity to take these words of the Special Rapporteur into their own courts in their own countries to say that their rights to do business in Zimbabwe, their rights to be involved in gas, their rights to be involved in gold and other opportunities in Zimbabwe have been lost to the Chinese because of illegal sanctions that were imposed by their countries, and their countries forcing them not to invest in Zimbabwe due to these penalties. So this over-compliance that banks and institutions have had to be exerted to can now be used against the United States, and they can be taken to courts. Those banks that they impose penalties on, banks like Barclays Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, CBZ won its case against the United States in a court case, and those banks can now also go and approach courts to ask for those penalties to be returned and to ask for the payment of damages by the United States for these illegal sanctions, and therefore the illegal penalties or the unenforceable penalties that they were imposing.
Okay, but why are the people on the sanctions list very, very quiet? I've not seen many of them coming out to speak against the sanctions. Do you think that there's a reason for this silence?
The reason for this silence a lot of times is ignorance. And you will see that it is only generally the black people of Zimbabwe that tend not to respond to their listings on these lists. We know that Van Hoogstraten, Bredenkamp, Rottenbach, and other white people who were on these lists, they challenged those lists and were removed from those lists. So the only people that got left on those lists were the black guys. CBZ was willing to accept the penalty that the Americans had given. They had actually negotiated that penalty from 3.8 billion US dollars down to 380 million US dollars. And then the board changed and a new chairman, an American, a white man came and sat on that board and became the chairman of that board. And only then did he begin proceedings against the United States to challenge these sanctions legally. And CBZ won. Soon after that, we have one of our most prominent business people in Zimbabwe, also who sits on the board or as a shareholder of CBZ, was involved then in also going after the United States in courts with ZB Bank and other institutions of Zimbabwe, which were then taken off the list. So these people know what to do. The precedent has been set. The case law is already in existence of how it is that these sanctions can be challenged, and the case is won in international courts to show that these sanctions are illegal. But I don't understand why the individuals, particularly the black business people, the black government officials, have not come together to challenge their listing and to actually challenge and ask for damages for having been punished without trial. And I think this is something that they must do. I think they must hold hands, do it together. I've been approaching a number of them to say, let us assist you to get off this list. Let us assist you to actually fight cases against the United States, because we've already got precedents in case law, and they didn't seem too interested. But I hope that this special rapporteur's result, together with the precedents of the case law, will now make a lot of people go and approach the courts and embarrass the United States, quite frankly.
Okay, that is very, very interesting. And Rutendo, I know we said we're going to talk for 10 minutes today, and I'll be bringing you here every week on Thursday so that we can unpack this topic. And next week, I want us to go through the previous cases, like the CBZ case, like all the other people who've been removed from the sanctions list. I want us to go in detail and say why they were removed from those sanctions list, because this is where we are. I believe that everyone now has got the power, they've got the ammunition to be removed from those sanctions lists. So I hope you'll be able to do some research for us, and then next week you show us what happened. Thank you very much, Rutendo. Is there anything else you want to say before we close this discussion?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that Africans have got to start understanding that their humanity is nothing less than the humanity of other races. The problem that we've had in Zimbabwe for these sanctions that lasted for 20 years is that we didn't know our humanity, we didn't believe that we're human beings, and we didn't have a full grasp and understanding of human rights law and international law for us to challenge. That's why it took us 20 years under a very educated president like Robert Mugabe. And all of a sudden now, with this new president that a lot of people have doubted if he actually knows what he's doing, he has illustrated that he's a listening president. He's illustrated that he is a president who's willing to change strategy if the strategy is not working. He depoliticized the fight, legalized it based on some of the recommendations we were making, and he's beginning to bring a restoration of Zimbabwean human rights, African human rights, and the human rights of our people. And finally, you need to understand that this decision that has been reached by the special rapporteur has also started to change international law in the aspect that the return of stolen property or colonized properties to Black and Native peoples is being proved to be legitimate. Hence, the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe for giving its people back its land are being reversed to say, therefore, in international custom, it's okay for Africans to get back what they lost during crime of colonialism. And this, we are changing international law as a small little country like Zimbabwe. That's why they've seen us as a threat, because we have the potential and capacity to change what it is that the Europeans have been doing for many years, which is trying to hold on to property rights from a crime against humanity, which Zimbabwe has challenged successfully.
Right. Thank you very much, Rutendo Benson Matinyarare. And I would like to state that you are the first person in Zimbabwe to fight these sanctions single-handedly. In the beginning, many people, they did not understand what you were doing. What has given you so much strength? I want to make this a last statement. What has given you so much strength to soldier on for 10 years on this topic?
I think it's correct to say that I didn't fight it alone, because there were people who were listening, who implemented the strategies that we were saying. So it was a partnership. Yes, I had to fight to change the strategy, but what drove me is the fear of our country going into war. I knew that in 2008, there was a ship that was off the coast of Mozambique that intended to invade Zimbabwe, if our government had refused a government of national unity. I knew that there was another ship that was sent when we had the transition in 2017. So, and I know that Thabo Mbeki had been asked in 2002 to allow the Americans and the British to invade Zimbabwe. So I know that the West has been intent on invading Zimbabwe to remove ZANU-PF, because they see ZANU-PF as a threat because of this challenge to this international doctrine that has stood for 600 years, the doctrine of discovery. ZANU-PF is challenging it, and they are challenging it by taking back their property and then fighting the sanctions that have been imposed as punishment for that, as if it was a crime to bring back our own property. Now, knowing that, and knowing the geopolitical influence that ZANU-PF will have if this stands and if the sanctions are removed, I knew that we have to fight the sanctions legally and not allow them to be turned into an invasion like what happened in Libya, not to be turned into an invasion like what happened in Iraq, where these sanctions were put on these countries, their fiber, the social fiber broke down, the economic fiber broke down, and sooner or later people began to revolt against the government, enabling the West to jump in. I did not want that for Zimbabwe. And so that's what drove me. And I lost so much in the fight. I lost business contacts. I lost my clients. Most of my clients were American, ironically. I lost those. I even lost white corporations in South Africa because of this fight. But it was worth it to save our country, to stop us from being invaded, and to ensure that we have the right to control our land and our resources without punishment. And the UN has just confirmed that, and I'm over the moon. And I thank the people in the government who listened to what we were saying and who implemented that. I give them a lot of thanks, because without them adopting what we're saying, nothing would have worked.
Rutendo, I really appreciate you.
I just want to say this, Gambakwe. Nothing would have worked, because institutions like the UN, in as much as they allow individuals to put in complaints, like the UN Human Rights Council allows individuals to complain about human rights violations, if there are not enough individuals who put in such a complaint, they don't pay attention to it. So I had put in a complaint in 2019 to the UN Human Rights Council about the sanctions, but that wasn't adequate. So it took our government going to the UN together with the AU and the SADC, and now putting in their case that they need the special rapporteur to come and see what sanctions are doing, and that worked. So as an individual, it hadn't worked, but when the government got involved, and when the SADC and the AU got involved, then it began to have gravitas, which is what we were asking the government to do for the past 3 years.
Thank you very much, Rutendo. And I don't want to keep you for longer. Let's see you again next week on Thursday. This is going to be very, very interesting. And I know you've got the staying power to take us through this fight. Thank you very much, Rutendo.
Thank you, Gambakwe. And I just want to remind people, we can't keep doing this alone. We need support. And we're not getting support from the Zimbabwean people. We need to get more support to allow us to make this fight bigger, to lobby in America, to lobby British Parliament, to lobby international players in other countries that are under sanctions. We are unable to do that without support, and we are not getting support. Let this not be a fight of an individual or a few people. Let it now become a national fight, which we are winning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rutendo, and good night.
Good night.
Right. I think that was amazing. That was very, very interesting. We had Rutendo here, and I really enjoyed talking to Rutendo. He's going to be a regular guest every week on Thursday. Rutendo is going to be joining us here on Gambakwe Media to talk about the sanctions. And this is going to go on until the fight is won. And I am joined today by my regular guest, Mr. Jason Midzi. How are you, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you? Are you hearing me loud and clear?
Fantastic. I'm just hearing you a bit soft, so maybe if you could increase the volume, that would be nice, but maybe you can just talk loudly. I think that would be fine.
Thank you. Sorry, I think my volume was a bit low.
Okay, that's fantastic. And let's have a quick discussion, Mr. Midzi. And the quick discussion is regarding the by-elections. You saw the announcement by ZEC and the confirmation by President Mnangagwa that the by-elections are going to be held next year on 23 April. What is the preparations that you have made as the Zimbabwe People's Action Party?
Here.
Sorry, are you there, Mr. Midzi?
I'm here.
Okay, we're not hearing you. Did you hear the question that I asked you?
Not exactly. Maybe let me come off the audio.
Okay, that's fine. I'll give you a few seconds to get ready.
Maybe let me come from the audio only. I think, or I was logged on.
Right, Mr. Midzi, are you there? Are you able to see me? Are you able to hear me? Or you're still fixing your sound?
Uyo uko kuno apo pano mamuona kere nai anovura meso anovura nzeve anokaya marigi kama kwetoti komu Toti como usasaire anogaya mari
Zimbabwe uyo anotara mari anogaya mari garai mamunzwa pane nyaya pano zvamunoda kunzwa zvinotaurwa pano madiko kumunzwa mugova ne.com Zimbabwe vanogaya mari vanotara mari vanosiya mari Zimbabwe vanotara feya kuti pamberi zvichafamba sei vanomuterere zvikubatsirei mukufamba kwenyu zvikubatsirei mirai ndikudze kuti chokwadi pano chizere Zimbabwe vanogaya cash vanopa mafacts vanotara straight vane evidence vane confidence plus intelligence
entertainment current affairs and news Zimbabwe.com usasarire Zimbabwe anogaya mari
Right. I apologize for the technical difficulties we're having. Mr. Midzi, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, Mr. Gambakwe. Can you hear me clearly and loud?
Yes, I can hear you clearly, and I apologize for the lack of video on your side. So let us go back to the question that I was asking. The President, Idi Mnangagwa, has confirmed that elections or by-elections are going to be held in April, on 23 April. ZEC has put out a schedule of all these elections. What is your party planning to do? What is your view on this announcement of the roadmap for the by-elections?
Yeah, Mr. Gambakwe, our roadmap is very clear. We are a party that is made up of people who are willing to do the right thing. So we looked at the whole scenario and the reasons why all these by-elections are there. Then we felt there are some that we can legitimately participate in, and some that we have to distance ourselves from, according to our ideology and the revolution that we are bringing to Zimbabwe. ZPAP, Zimbabwe People's Action Party, is bringing a revolution, a total change in our political culture. The current political culture is that our politics is made up of dishonest leaders and dishonest activities that rob people of the powers of their votes or of the members that they voted into power. So as a party, we felt, one, we're not going to participate in any ward or council elections. We're not going to field any councillor. I'll give you the reasons why. We are also not going to field any of our members in by-elections that came as a result of the recalls of MDC Alliance MPs. Because if we do so, we are undermining people's power. People voted for candidates that they like in 2018. So it's those people who have the mandate to recall in a fair democracy, in a fair situation, in fair recalls, not political parties and all that stuff. I will come to explain why. Now, so we have 5 legitimate by-elections that came as a result of the death of the sitting members of parliament. Kuwadzana, there was an MP for MDC Alliance called Miriam Mushai. She passed on in September 2020. We are going to participate in that one because it's a legitimate by-election. It came as a result of death of a member, not a recall by Monzora and his friends. We are also going to contest in Glenview North, where MP Kennedy Dina of MDC Alliance passed on in November 2020. We are also going to contest in Kwekwe Central, where MP Masango Blackman Matambanazo died in July 2020. We are also going to contest in Marondera East, where MP Patrick Chidakwa died in September 2020, and Mwenezi East, where MP Josby Oma died in October 2020. These are the only legitimate by-elections that the people of Zimbabwe are supposed to partake and participate in, and they will not put pressure on our already pressurized finance and economy. So we are going to contest in 5 legitimate by-elections: Kuwadzana, Glenview North, Kwekwe Central, Marondera East, Mwenes East, legitimate because the sitting members died. Those of recalls, we are not going to participate in that. We don't want to fight the people of Zimbabwe because they voted already and those members are still there. They are simply being barred from coming to parliament because of a political dishonest hatred, polarization, and, people are being robbed of their power in democracy. So that's our position, Mr. Gambagwe.
Okay, so are you going to campaign for the MDC in those wards where you're not contesting? Are you going to ask your members to vote for the MDC?
Under normal circumstances, if the MDC approaches us and says there's a problem, we want to partake in those elections, then we may inform them that it may be needless for them to do so because people are there already who have voted. They simply need to take action and get those people to go back to parliament, not to allow this dirty politics and dishonest politics, lawfare, to affect the will of the people.
Okay. I think it's very, very clear. And let's keep talking about this. Have you registered your party at ZEC?
We notified ZEC of our party, and that is the only process we do. We did that. We notified that ZEC that we exist and we're going to contest in elections in July.
Yes. Okay. Then I just want a clarification on Mufudzi. He was here under your party as a candidate for Harare. Is he still going to be in Chambuka? That is he going to be a candidate for your party?
Mufudzi was fired from the party for putting the name of the party in disrepute. Mufudzi, when there were rumors that there were going to be by-elections in December 2020, if I'm not mistaken, Mufudzi left UK and went to Zimbabwe. He was going to represent Harare Central back then. And instead of doing the party programs that we told him to go and do, he ended up doing his own things, whatever, with a lot of women. So soon after his journey, we discussed the matter with, what is her name, with Bev Sbanda, the then wife at that time. And we told Bev Sbanda that Mr. Mfudzi will take no further action in our party. And we did that. The then wife knows that. Mr. Mfudzi knows that.
Okay, that's fantastic. And I really appreciate that you came at short notice to talk about the by-elections. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
Yes, before we close, Mr. Gambakwe, I said we're not going to partake in local government elections or council elections. Why? Because we want, in our ideology, we want to kick out political parties from councils, because we believe councils should be run by independent people from communities who elect their councillors and mayors and run their communities. The current situation that you see in Zimbabwe and South Africa is not health for communities. People's progress and people's service delivery in their cities, wards, and communities are at standstill because of the presence of vouchers called political parties in local government. Local government should be run by a minister and independents who run their own communities and advocate for their own communities. If you look at everywhere in Africa where councillors are elected from political parties, all those areas have been run down. Zimbabwe was run down. Come to South Africa, it's load shedding after load shedding. It's beans, uncollected beans after uncollected beans. So we really need to kick out political parties from communities, from wards, local government. Mayors and councillors should be independent people who live in those wards, who want to represent their people and who are accountable to their people, reporting to government and applying for grants from government and other sources to run their cities, suburbs well. The current situation in South Africa and Zimbabwe is a recipe for poor service delivery for the people. Point number one. Now I come back to the issue of to finalize on the issue of the by-elections that we are going to participate in for the MPs. Why are we not contesting in areas where recalls were done? One, the issue of recalls, it undermines democracy by making elected officials afraid to progress their decisions. And recalls have been used by political parties as a political weapon against rival elected officials. This has been the case in countries like Venezuela, countries like, there are so many countries where elections are being used by political parties as political weapons, these recalls, to say, I want to fix them. Because they fired me or because they don't agree with me, I have to recall them or have to ensure that their members are recalled. It also puts unnecessary pressure on our budget. So there are so many reasons why we are saying we cannot fight the people of Zimbabwe. People of Zimbabwe need salaries on their table, good salaries. Teachers are earning $200 per month. That's not a good thing. Instead of participating in those unnecessary elections, illegitimate elections, that money should be taken to teachers and civil servants and other workers. And the MPs who were elected by the people should be allowed back into parliament and save their people. Then fate will take its course in 2023. So that's our position on these by-elections. No council by-elections, because we want to kick out vouchers called political parties from our wards, because they are running down wards. As you can see in South Africa next door and in Zimbabwe, it's evident. Every ward, bins are not collected. Roads are like, if you go to Waterfalls, Forbes Road, it's like, it's a rural road, a dirt road, gravel road. So this is the situation, Mr. Gambakwe. We are bringing honest politics, and in all fairness, a normal and legitimate political party will not tamper with MDC MPs who are supposed to go to parliament. Our position is all those people like Amos Chibaya, Charlton Wende should go back to parliament and save their people. They were elected. Thank you very much.
Right, Mr. Midzi, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again next week when President Mtambua is going to join us here for further discussions. And I think that's it. That's it for this week. Thank you very much, Mr. Midzi, and we'll talk again next week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gambakwe. We like to be here.
Okay, fantastic. Good night, everybody.
Uyo, uko, kuno, abo, ano. Mamuona gere nai. Ano pura meso.